Welcome to the Retirement Café Podcast. I have a special episode for you this week as I welcome back YouTube phenomenon, podcaster and author Pete Matthew to discuss his latest book, The Meaningful Money Retirement Guide. Building upon the success of his first book, which focused on growing wealth, Pete now turns to helping people confidently navigate the next stage, retirement. With humor and clarity, Pete explains why retirement planning can feel overwhelming and how his book aims to demystify the process. It's about cutting through the jargon, providing practical steps, and helping people build a plan that reflects their values and lifestyle. So without further ado, here's my chat with one and only Pete Matthew. Welcome to the Retirement Café Podcast, Pete Matthew.
Hey, thanks for having me back. Justin, you okay, bud? Great to be here.
Very well. It's always great to see you. I always just, I always feel that we could just talk for
kindred spirits. Absolutely right.
Until the pub opens. But we're here because, obviously, for people that don't know you, I can't believe that's possible. But Meaningful Money, Pete Matthew, and his new book. His new book, which is flying off the bookshelves, I understand. Yeah. Flying. Your publishers, and by the way, this is not a self-published book. Your publishers are very pleased, I understand, with its initial sales.
They are. I had an email yesterday as we record this, we're a little over, I think, not quite 5 weeks in since launch, and yeah, they're delighted. So, you don't write a book to make money, right? That's not why I wrote the first one, certainly, and even this one. Just trying to get good information out there, man. And it's a real slog writing a book. You know a thing or two about that as well. But it's very, very rewarding. And it's nice to see that it's going down well and the reviews that are coming in are very positive as well. So, yes, I'm feeling gratified and pleased and humbled.
Well, brilliant. And it is great. And I've got lots of highlights and thumbnail pages and things I want to talk to you about today. Okay. So I really enjoyed, for someone who probably should have a bit of a clue about, retirement planning, I actually learned a lot. So this is good.
I don't believe that. Yeah,
this is great news. Always when we kind of step out to do these books or create content, there's a problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
We feel that people may have. So what is the problem that if people were thinking about maybe picking up this book after listening or watching us today, what problem will your book solve for them?
Yeah, right. Look, great question. My entire life, really, the thing I feel I was put on earth to do is to just cut through the jargon and the complexity, all of which is very self-serving for the financial services industry, right? Because we don't teach how to manage money to our kids. We don't teach it in the workplace, not in any way effectively. So unless we were lucky enough to have a kind of a financial mentor in our lives, or we happen to have an aptitude and we kind of learn as we go, which is most people, how are you supposed to discern what off plus is, or crystallization of pensions, or all this sort of stuff? It's full of jargon and nonsense. But what people really care about is, so what does this mean for me? Am I going to have anything like a nice life when I retire? What does retirement even look like? So the first book was like up until retirement. It was about building wealth, really, getting out of debt, learning how to budget at the basic end, and then all the way up to investing and what sort of plans to use. And this was the obvious next book to write, okay, because you kind of got to that point. It's like, okay, to what end have we done all that? We've done all that to get enough in the pot so that we can not have to work one day. But that's easier said than done. There's a whole load of stuff about the transition into retirement. I mean, your book, I mention your book in mine because I think the Retirement Cafe is just dealt with the much wider aspects of retirement, the sort of socio-emotional parts of it, the health things. It's a brilliant piece of work, and obviously the work you're doing on the podcast as well. I'm sort of by nature do this, then that. Right? Forget all of the rest of the stuff. This is what you need to do to organize things. And one thing we talk about all the time here at my practice is it's our job to get money out of the way for you, because money is not relevant in the grand scheme of things. It's not important. it just serves the things that are important: our ability to live well, have great relationships, be healthy, love the people we want to love, and all that sort of stuff. That's what matters in life, right? Nobody dies wishing they had more zeros on their bank statement. It's all the sort of proper stuff. Money is there to serve that. And so my goal really is to help people organize their money so that it can serve that, and so that it doesn't take a lot of organizing. So usually a bit of work to organize things and tidy everything up, but then just get on with living because it's all done. So that's essentially is what this book is about. Here's how to organize your finances so that you can concentrate on what's really important in retirement.
And it does it brilliantly.
Thank
so
you.
I commend you. I really do. You know, I put myself in the reader's shoes.
Great.
And I
Thank
thought
you.
to myself, God, this is great. I love this is, as you rightly say, I've read this chapter, but now what do I need to do?
Yeah.
Bang, action points.
Well, that structure I hit upon by accident when I started the Meaningful Money podcast back in 2012. And pretty much every episode for years and years and years has been what you need to know and what you need to do. Right. So what you need to know, i.e. excluding all the stuff you don't really, right? I'm all for educating people and empowering people, but there's a whole lot of stuff like 99.5% of people don't need to know. Here's what you do need to know, and here's what you need to do with that information. Otherwise, it's an incomplete process. So yeah, I'm glad that came across, man. Thank you.
It did. And I also then related to some of the conversations that probably I definitely have had, and probably you have as well with your clients, which is, thanks, Pete. It's obviously you're very knowledgeable about the subject. You've told me all about the ins and outs of this and that, and my policies and pensions and investments and all the rest of it. But just cutting to the chase, what am I doing today?
Yeah.
And that's what they ask, isn't it? It's like, what's next?
Yeah. So
because I've heard all that, to a certain extent, noise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And eventually I zoned out after a while, Pete, sorry,
of course.
or Justin,
Yeah, that's right.
Look, I trust you. But can I just do what I need to do? Tell me what I need to do now.
That's right. And we do that in the financial planning process that we walk clients through, let alone obviously I can't help every listener to the podcast, right? There's tens of thousands of them, but those that do come to our practice, that we essentially finish the planning process. It's like, what have you got? Where is it all now? Let's do some planning. Are you going to be okay? Yes, that's the main question to answer. If we can answer that in the affirmative, then we're in the realms of finessing and optimization, tax, access, drawdown, what money to take from where and when, all that sort of stuff, investment. That's what we do. That's what people pay us to do. So are you going to be okay? Yes. Right. Let's finesse it. But there's a point in every planning conversation I have with clients that we sort of say, right, here's how it's looking. So what? What do we do now? What's the point of this? And that's when we, again, bring it back to the conversation we've had all the way through, which is, we call them goals and objectives, which sounds a little bit cold, but it's like, what really matters to you? Let's now do the stuff we need to do to facilitate all the stuff that really lights you up, that we really get excited about. And that's what financial planning is, which I just think it's an amazing career. And I feel very blessed that I kind of fell into it 28 years ago. But it's a great process to be able to light people up like that by removing what most people think is their primary obstacle, which is the money.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the one statement that really jumped out of me in your book, which was, you say you have no plans to stop work ever.
Yes, unequivocal. Yeah.
Now, that is quite an interesting juxtaposition, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where are people are coming to you, to me, and they're buying your book to help facilitate that retirement plan.
Seems incongruous.
Actually, to a certain extent, this is not a problem to me.
No, I don't need this crap. Just like, I think we need to define work, right? I think because that would seem incongruous. I mean, so we need to define work. I don't anticipate doing what I'm doing now. I've just turned 50, right? So I don't anticipate doing this when I'm 80. I hope that I have the self-awareness and the humility to realize that probably when I'm 80, there's going to be far sharper minds than, and there already are. I've got 20 and 30 odds, something's working for me. And it's deeply depressing, but I'm already thinking, man, they're sharper than I am. They're quicker than I am already. So the work will change, right? I mean, I don't anticipate running a financial planning practice when I'm 80. I kind of like to be somewhat involved, maybe still rocking up on YouTube when I'm 80. That'd be interesting. But I actually use as an example my dad. Now, my dad was a pastor of a church. That's a very vocational thing. It's not a job as such. And he eventually kind of stopped being paid for that when he was 71. But I mean, my dad is 85 now, and he's still almost always in his study. And he said to me the other day, so I've decided to brush up on my Old Testament Hebrew. Now, that sounds like work to me, right? But he's keeping his mind active, and in so doing, he's teaching others. He's helping. It's what he was put on earth to do. And so it's work, but it doesn't feel like work. So I guess perhaps I need to look at exactly how I worded that sentence. But essentially, I don't ever want to sit and watch daytime TV.
No.
I don't ever want my calendar to be empty, at least not fully empty. That, obviously I'm all for relaxation and, headspace and all that sort of stuff. But I think I'd go nuts. Yeah. So I guess that's what I'm saying.
And of course, we are your dad is unbelievably fortunate.
Yeah.
We are as well, right?
Yeah.
We both love our work. We love helping people out with their financial issues, and it's good fun. But not everyone has that. Not everyone is lucky enough to have fallen into a role or a job or a vocation that is absolutely right for them.
That's right.
Or it may be that actually just their own family circumstances, things need to shift.
Yeah.
And I've worked with people who've, particularly been stressed, and the job is so, they're paid very well, but it's kind of, it's doing them in, and they're unfulfilled. And then you kind of go, well, retirement sounds a good idea at this point,
yeah.
Or I suppose one of the key things we're trying to help people with is, if we've created the financial wealth that allows them to have the choice, then that's a game changer, isn't it?
It really is. Money is usually the disabler of our hopes and dreams very often. Sometimes artificially, I mean, I'm sure you're the same. The number of people who say, I'm going to retire when I'm 65, and we run the numbers. And I was like, you could go now and you're only 58. And it's because they've sort of weirdly pinned this arbitrary age of 65 because that's when the state pension age used to be. So sometimes we kind of limit ourselves artificially, and sometimes, of course, money is a limitation. There's no doubt about that. But again, I think for the first or second chapter in the book is, what is retirement anyway these days? Yeah. It's just, in the last 50 years, it's changed massively from essentially you work 40 years for one big company. They give you a clock and a handshake when you're 65. You collect your state pension, you're dead within 5 or 10 years. 20 if you're lucky, right? Whereas now so many people have multiple careers in their working lives, however you want to define that. But actually so many people's working lives extend much longer, and they might not be paid work, but they might be volunteering, they might be helping in a church or synagogue or mosque or whatever, or they might be, really getting involved with their grandkids' lives. But they can do all that because they've got the financial cushion behind them. And so wealth gives you choice. It's the ultimate sort of freedom engine, isn't it? And retirement is it's utterly unique. I shouldn't use a comparative with the word unique. It is unique to every individual. And so we need to design our own lives, and we are fortunate to live in an era where that's actually possible, and increasingly so, that we can design a life which is richly ours, as long as we understand how to manage the money around it, because that's going to pay for it, right? Yeah. So if you're in a job you hate, but it pays well, or even a job that it pays well and it's okay, you don't hate it, then it's a means to an end, hopefully. What I just want to do is kind of help people maybe just lift their heads up a little bit from the grindstone and think, what could this make possible? Even if I have to stick it out for 10 years, what could I do now to use this money in a totally different way in the future. And, but we need to know the levers, and we need to know the tools to be able to do that.
And I think you addressed this perfectly in the you talk about the home straight, the great transition, but also the stages of life where you can have an impact on that retirement plan.
Yes.
So what is the amount that you need? What is the number?
Yeah.
And that's a simple question, but a massive question.
It's quite a simple question with a massive answer, isn't it? And it's yeah. So there's a great book by Lee Eisenberg called The Number, and the FIRE, Financial Independence Retire Early movement, talk a lot about the number. Is it 25 times your annual outgoings? That's the amount of money you need to have behind you to be able to last the rest of your life. And there is some studies based on that. Depends on who you read as to whether that's accurate or not. Look, I'm all for simplification, but there's a fine line between simplification and what I like to call reductionism. So in other words, you reduce things too far and you lose any kind of nuance. So one of the things that I find people don't give enough weight to is guaranteed incomes in retirement. So the state pension, particularly the FIRE movement, they really don't, they really, I think, minimize the importance of the state pension. Many of them are in their 30s and like, well, there won't be one when I get there. Well, they probably will. It might change. You might get it later. Maybe there'll be an element of means testing down the line. We don't know, right? But right now, if you're about to retire, a state pension is $1,000 a month. If it's a couple, that's $2,000 a month. That's not bad baseline income, particularly if you haven't got a mortgage, all right? Or if you haven't got rental costs or whatever. That's not a bad baseline before you've amassed anything else. So the number, I think, too often excludes the nuance of state pension, maybe defined benefit pensions, even a little bit, even if it's a little old DB pension that you had from when you worked in the 90s. But, it's $5,000 a year. That's not very much. It's not bad baseline income. It's probably half your monthly grocery bill. It's actually quite useful. And if you just discard it, I think you end up with a skewed, artificially high number. My contention is I think more people could retire on less actual capital than they think they need. And of course, retirement doesn't mean necessarily you never work again. I spoke to a client the other day, and this guy's like a CFO, like earning an absolute fortune, and I'm stressed to the max and everything like that. And he says to me, "Do you want, Pete, my dream job is," he said, "the thing I'm going to do when I retire." He said, "There's a Majestic Wine over the road." All I want to do is work in Majestic Wine and talk, just try different things and talk to people about wine. And he doesn't need to do it, but it'll keep him active and interested in all that sort of stuff. But it'll probably pay him £1,000 a month. And so why couldn't you need less behind you if you've got just little retirement incomes or whatever? So the concept of a number, I think, is a little bit too simple. That's essentially what I'm saying.
Yes. And of course, by putting kind of flesh on the bones actually is really helpful.
Yes.
So there's a couple of things, stories I'd like to tell you about. There's a chap who I know you know, and I know well. He's a client of mine, a chap called Rory Sutherland.
Yep.
And he talks about the problem with people in their 60s is that they don't consume anything any longer. I.e., they're not buying new sofas.
Yeah, right.
And they're not decorating the house so often. And they're not, whereas in your 20s, you're buying everything because you haven't got it.
Changing it every 5 years, right?
You're really keeping the economy going.
Yeah,
aren't you?
That's true.
Whereas actually, there's lots of 70 or 80-year-olds, and we have this experience, don't we? That people seem to be spending less and less and less as they get older.
It's really hard to get them to spend because they're like, what am I going to spend it on? I've got everything I need.
Yeah.
It's like, and nobody likes wasting money, so they're not going to change the carpet for no reason, are they?
No. So that's an interesting concept. But there was another client I worked with, and they came over an annual review, and I looked at it and I said, there's a real good chance you've got a continual success rate in your financial plan, but all we really need is a significant market decline, I don't know, a 2008 to, it's a 98 to 2008 stock market performance. Things could get a little tight for you based on an inflation rate of this and et cetera, et cetera. And he said, what would you do? And I said, well, personally, I think you could get a little part-time job.
Yeah.
And he said, well, the problem is I'm really enjoying my volunteering. I'm driving the minibus for the charity. I'm taking the old folks around. I'm loving it, et cetera, et cetera. I said, look, I'm not telling you to get a job. I'm just saying it would make a big difference. Another 500 quid a month coming in would really kind of secure your retirement. Really, really, you know, where you could pretty much be ambivalent about your costs. So he took that thought away, and I had an email from him last week and said, he said, I've been talking to the charity. I've told them I need to get a job. So they've offered to pay me.
Nice. Exactly.
Now
Brilliant.
he's 2 days a week doing exactly the same work that he was doing before, loving it, and it loves doing charitable work, but he's on minimum wage. Which
is fine.
Which, of course,
plenty.
Actually gives him, it tops up his income. He's still loving life. And that significant shift has just rocketed his plan.
I mean, and it is rocket fuel, isn't it? Why? Because he has to draw less from his capital earlier. You know, he can leave it longer. When he does need to draw, it's less than he would have had to. So all the money that he's not drawing because he's now earning minimum wage 3 days a week, that's compounding into the future. And that's super powerful over a 20, 30-year retirement career, isn't it? Yeah. So, the little things, particularly at the early end, I always say the left-hand side of the chart, but you know what sort of chart I'm looking at, a cash flow chart. Yeah. So in other words, in the near term, you know, it makes all the difference at the far end. And makes plans more resilient in case of the sort of market conditions or whatever that you're talking about. Yeah, it's good fun. There's lots of little levers, right? And we just need to know what they are.
Yeah. And this is where I think your book really addresses this is, you know, what are the levers that you can do? What are the things, you know, state pension and working out your spending and, and working out everything you've got. But how do they bring that all together? You know, how do they, you know, if they're not sitting with you and I, they're just sitting with the resources that are available to them because they've got a computer, they've got access to your book. Yeah. What's the next steps that they can take?
So you kind of, the first thing is always to know where you are and what you've got, right? And that includes the capital you've got, where it is, what kind of account it's in. You know, is it ISA? Is it pension? Is it GIA? Premium bonds? Bank account? All that sort of stuff. What kind of account is it in? How is it invested? So, and then also what incomes are coming in and when. So you always kind of need to plan. You can't plan too far into the future, not with any accuracy, right? Because the things get more and more woolly the further out you look. But the next 3 to 5 years is pretty clear. You sort of know what costs are going to come down the line for you. Think, well, daughter's getting on pretty well with a boyfriend. I can see that this might be the one, possibly engagement, maybe wedding in 3 years. Better be thinking about that. That's going to be a big cost or whatever, right? So you can sort of think about the next 3 to 5 years with an element of clarity. And if you know what incomes are coming in, you can take a reasonable stab at what your annual outgoings might be. Because for most of us, our general costs don't change that much, right? And so your levers are always spending, right? You can control it, but some costs will just come to you. Costs, and people throw a lot of money away in costs, right? So you got to keep your costs low. Tons of stuff in the book about that. I have views on that as well, how investing should be done and stuff like that. Don't waste money on advisors that don't add value. Don't waste money on active fund management because they generally don't add value, all those sorts of things. So costs, tax, obviously, and that comes down to what money you draw from where. You know, obviously after your tax-free cash, anything you draw from a pension is going to be taxable. Anything you draw from an ISA is not. Anything you draw from a GIA, a general investment account, may not be, but you may pay capital gains tax on it or whatever, right? So you need to know the tax implications, and I go through, these are the main kind of accounts. This is what you need to know about them. So that you can start to think about what money should I draw from where and when. So spending, costs, tax. And I think the other one, and it's a big one, it doesn't get talked about enough, is the potential impact of drawing money from distressed investments. So you mentioned your client there where, look, if we have a really rough period in the markets that's prolonged, but you need this money to sustain your lifestyle, right? It'll have a greater impact on the longevity of a portfolio if you draw money, sell assets that are distressed. Now, it might be that you can't stop that ever happening, but there is a mechanism that we use here and that I describe in the book called a cash flow ladder, which is very simple. It's like take little or no risk, investment risk, with money you're going to need in the short term. And so if we know what our spending is going to be, we know where it is, and we can think about where we might draw from and when, and then we can invest accordingly and say, I'm going to need that 20,000 quid in that account the year after next. So I don't want to risk that money because I know I'm going to need to spend that then. And those kind of levers together, it sounds complicated, but once it's set up, my contention is that you can probably manage this in 2 or 3 hours a year, really, subject to anything, sort of untoward happening. But the whole goal is to try and simplify this such that the money gets out of the way. It takes a bit of work up front, but most people don't have very complicated affairs. No. Even if they've got half a dozen pension plans because they've collected them as they've gone through their career, I talk about how to consolidate and whether to, because you should simplify that stuff generally. So these are the levers, man: costs, tax, spending, and how you're invested. The rest is completely out of your control. You can't do anything about inflation, central bank response, can't do anything about our orange friend in the White House or the nutcase in the Kremlin. None of those things are in our control. We can only control the stuff that we can, and that's what we should put our energy to.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, the chap I was talking about who suddenly got paid for his voluntary work, he actually arrived with a nice little spreadsheet. Great. And he said, I know you've got it all built on your cash flow software. I know we use the same one. He said, I know all that, but actually I really wanted to have a handle on it in my own home.
Great.
And he just listed out all his expenditure. He listed out what his income sources were, knew when his state pension was coming in, knew his state pension was fully funded.
Yeah.
And there weren't any missing years. Said, well, look, my wife looks like she has got some missing years and she's in the 2 NHS pension schemes and can't quite work out which one's going to, so, but he put the numbers in and he has some questions for me about that. Yeah. But he got all the numbers in and I just went, I can't fault this.
It's a cash flow plan.
Right. When I showed him against my Voyant cash flow plan, on the paid highly technical software.
Yeah, I know. We pay a fortune for.
And I went, Steve, you've done a great job. You've done a great job here.
Fantastic.
You've got a real understanding and learning about what you've put together.
Perfect. I love that. I get people to do that. I teach people to do that in my academy. It's so good. And it's not rocket science. I just think, as an aside, one of the things that winds me up about our profession is its intrinsic arrogance, that we have some sort of kind of God-given knowledge that is not for the masses and we must protect it and just impart it as we feel, to the deserving, of course, being the people who pay us to impart that knowledge to them. Whereas actually this ain't rocket science. If it was, I couldn't do it, right? So it's really just a systematic approach, income and outgoings, eggs in baskets. It's the nuance. The reason why we have a job is knowing the difference between the 95 and the 2015 scheme in the NHS. Stuff like that. But even that is doable if you've got a mind.
It's not beyond a lot of people.
No. Exactly.
Maybe I've had a letter from HMRC from a client today who's lost his lifetime allowance protection, and is now relevant.
Doesn't matter now, but yeah.
Well, actually, there was implications of his contribution, but I won't get into it. But there is something there that he can need some advice on, which is great.
Yeah, good. It means you got a job for another year, right?
And also he just wants to dump the letter on me.
Yeah.
He is a delegator and just wants to sort this out. Thanks very much.
Great. Perfect. Well, that's why we have a job.
That's what I'm paying you for. The other thing that you address in the book, and I think it's really key, is this significant shift that retirees have from being a saver to a spender. And it's again another really challenging thing. Tell me about your experiences with that with people.
I bet you share them. It's probably the most difficult part of my job. Look, if you spend 40 years getting yourself financially in a position where you can retire well and you no longer need to work, the mindset that you need to do that is obviously, you don't become a spendthrift. You have a sense of spending less than you earn so that you can put money aside for the future. And what you're doing there, the biggest transition of all when it comes to retirement is from saving to spending, because unlike to build wealth, you need to spend less than you earn. But when we stop working, most of us spend more than we earn, more than is coming in from pensions and stuff. Most of us, right? And so that's fine as long as we've got capital. We've got a pot of money that we can draw from. So our capital, our combined value of our bank accounts, ISAs, pensions, all that stuff is a bucket with water in it with a tap on. And instead of pouring water in the top, we're going to need to open the tap now. We're going to need to spend some of the money we spent 40 years saving. But that is really hard for people to do, for many people to do, not everybody. And my sort of realization over the sort of decades I've been doing my job is that most people leave far too much money on the table. Too many people worry about long-term care. It is expensive, right? But the odds of you needing it are probably lower than you think. And if you do need long-term care, you probably won't need it for as long as you think. Of course, there's always outliers. Some people need long-term care for 15 years and their entire estate gets used up. But that's not normally the case. I can think of 2 clients in 28 years I've been doing my job whose entire estate has been eroded by care costs. But I've had lots of people go into care, usually for 2 or 3 years at most. It takes a dent, but their kids still inherit a decent legacy. But most people leave too much money on the table. They don't spend enough early enough. So we spend a lot of time here front-end loading people's spending. There's various studies. Some show that spending declines over time. Some show that amount of spending doesn't decline that much, but what you spend it on changes. And so, but again, perhaps it's an oversimplification, but I just think, man, tomorrow is not promised to us. I need to plan to live till I'm 95 or 100, but I need to really enjoy now because I might not get there. It's a bit of a fine line, that, because some people, you get some people in their 20s on TikTok or whatever, they're like, you might be dead tomorrow, so just enjoy and spend everything. That's a childish view. The alternative is, I'm going to need a lot later in life, so I'm going to go without in my 60s and early 70s. And yet that's the time when you've got your health, your strength, the most money. And so, look, you've got to use it. Money's for using, it's not for hoarding. Too many people hold on to too much to give to their families. Right? Forever telling people to look after themselves first, but it's really hard conversation to have with parents. I'm a parent, I got kids. It's this weird hardwired things to look after our progeny. But I'm telling my kids, okay, I put good lessons in you. You're looking after yourself, right? And so, look, transitioning to spending is difficult because the skills that people use to get to the position to be able to retire don't desert them. They don't suddenly become spendthrifts. But do you know what? Sometimes it takes years for me to get through to people. And we also need to put some nuance on spending. We're not talking sort of conspicuous consumption, just buying a Bentley because you've got the money, when a Mondeo will do perfectly well and you'd be quite happy with that. But if you've got more money than you can ever spend, then we're in the realms of giving, philanthropy, and all that sort of stuff. Actually using money as opposed to just keeping it, which is a terrible use of money. There's only 3 good uses of money: spending now, investing to spend later, and giving away. Those are the only 3 things money should be used for.
Yeah. Wise words, Pete. Wise words. Now, obviously it's a great book.
Thank you.
And I think anyone listening to this or watching us today, get a copy, because you can just, even if you think you're on top of it, just go through it and check in where you're at with each stage. Whether you're in the kind of the run up, whether you're a few years before retirement, or you're maybe already in retirement and you're trying to kind of balance the books. If you want to, and I know you're not here to promote this, so I'm going to do it for you.
Thank you.
but you may get this and then go, right, I need to go and see an advisor because I don't want to do all this. Or you may get this and go, yeah, okay, that's pretty useful. That gets me further down the track. but you actually do have an academy as well,
Yeah.
don't you? That people can log into and they can buy into their course and they
Yeah.
can build some cash flow themselves.
Yeah.
So they can really, really enhance their kind of planning. And even if they only ever do that once, that's pretty significant. So just tell me a bit more about the Retirement Academy.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, there's 3 phases to the academy. The first phase is free. That's the foundational stuff. It's for those getting started with their finances. You know, debt elimination, learning how to budget, the basics of protection for their family, all that sort of stuff. Then there's the build wealth phase. So that is, as the name suggests, investing theory and practice. And how to sort of accelerate that and maximize it. So even how to choose the funds in your pension, all that sort of stuff. By far the most popular, though, and the most sort of engaged cohort in the audience is the retirement planning course. So it's one-off cost, right? And I tend to sort of describe it as the most distilled version. You can get everything in there for free on the podcast and the YouTube channel, but you've got to kind of hunt for it. There's hundreds, or well over 1,000 episodes when you combine the two. So the academy is sort of, look, here's the distilled version. You just work your way through it. There's 7 modules, load of video lessons, spreadsheets, calculators, workbooks, access to Voyant, which is the financial planning software you and I use every day with clients, and like 50 video lessons on how to use it. And you get access to that for a year included, and it's only 120 quid a year if you want to sort of keep hold of it. People love that. Yeah. And it's, you know, everything from how to build a cash flow ladder. There's live monthly Q&A calls with me. Those are a blast. They're hard work, but they're ace fun. And, you know, it's just another way. Some people read the book and they'll give them everything they need. Some people need a little bit more. And there's community in the academy as well. So the people bouncing off each other in the Facebook group. It's great. And then, of course, it's amazing how many people come through that and end up getting in touch with us at Jackson's just for the final rubber stamp. But look, my goal is to just try and get this stuff in as many people's hands as possible. And so it's not ridiculous, cost, not really. I like to think it's good value. And if you use the coupon code podcast, if you want to take a look and sign up, then there's a discount on that. So look, it's a course, videos, people can work through it at their own pace, but there's a lot of support in there as well. And it's kind of a little bit more than just helping yourself. It's a kind of guided, assisted work through this. So check it out. See if it's for you. 30-day money back guarantee, all the usual good stuff.
Brilliant.
Thank you for that.
Well, no, I think it's great what you're doing, Pete, and you're helping so many more people who don't reach people like you and I.
No, sure.
And you know, we were talking earlier about where we are on client numbers and how many people we can actually help, and it's a drop in the ocean, you know. And
it really is.
There's so many people that, you know, there's a tsunami of people getting towards retirement, and therefore. For whatever reason, some reason the people do need to see people like us. Yeah. For an awful lot of people, they don't. If they could actually, you know, just do a course, read a book, you know, get some unbiased, you know, help with this. It will probably be the best investment that they could possibly do.
I agree, of course. You know, if I was like personally sort of really money focused, which I'm just not, then you wouldn't do any of this. You wouldn't give it away for free or very low cost. But again, that comes down to sort of the arrogance that I dislike so much in our profession. I'm just of the view that the universe looks after you if you help other people, and that's been proven to be true in my life. And literally, Meaningful Money started out as a hobby, right? I just thought, I quite like messing around with video cameras and software. Let me just talk about something. What am I going to talk about? I'm a reasonable keyboard player and drummer, but I'm nowhere near good enough to talk about that. You know, I live in a beautiful part of the country, but I'm not Cornish, so that's a bit sort of false. Hey, why don't I talk about money? I'm pretty good at that. I understand that. And, you know, I mean, 600 podcast episodes, 650 video episodes later, I'm still enjoying it just as much as before. And people still tell me, you know, I thought I knew this stuff, but I learned half a dozen things from that book. Thank you. And I just think that's awesome. I love it. So I consider myself supremely blessed, man. I have a fantastic career doing something I adore. And I love helping people. And, you know, I've been able to do it for 15 years. So I hope there's many more years ahead of me yet.
Yeah, so do I. So do I. Thank you, Pete. Where do people find the book? Where do people find your channel? Where do people find the course?
Yeah,
Give me all the links.
Good. Just search Meaningful Money, right? Meaningful Money. The book is anyway. You can buy books. There's a couple of signed versions in bookshops in London. Hopefully they've gone by now. I like doing ninja signings. Cool. But look, you just search Meaningful Money. The website is meaningfulmoney.tv, and you jump off from there. But you'll find me. I'm a bit of a tart online, so I don't take much finding.
Well, thanks for that. We'll obviously put all the links in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you, man,
and what have you. But once again, brilliant to catch up, mate, and really appreciate everything, all the great work that you're doing.
The feeling's mutual, man. Thank you so much for having me. Keep doing what you're doing as well. You're making a huge difference. It's good to be alive.
Cheers, Pete. Thanks as always to Pete for joining me today. To get your copy of Pete's book, check out the show notes wherever you get your podcasts for a link. You'll also find the discount code for money off Pete's Meaningful Money Academy and discover how to connect with and follow Pete. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please share it with friends and family. And of course, you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts to help more people like you plan for a successful retirement. So until next time, I'm Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.